back to Yuri Studio, where I try to answer some of the questions I get about Yuri at panels and online. This is part 2 of our Gateway Yuri anime series, so if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, I recommend taking a moment to check out part 1, which looks at foundational Yuri anime of the 1990s. We started this conversation back in the mid-20th century, where basically all our conversations start for many reasons. We got the girl prince, and that was kind of it for a while, until the 1990s were hella formative for Yuri anime. The leader of the pack was Magical Girl series, and for a while, it seemed like that was going to dominate Yuri forever. But ha 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 on us in the West, because while we were watching that one thing, another totally different trope was about to take over in Japan. In the meantime, we, and by we I mean folks on the Yuricon mailing list, were waiting weekly for episodes of series that I call collectively Girls with Guns on the Run. Between 2001 and 2007, we watched, enjoyed, and bought many soundtracks of and drama CDs for Noir, Madlax, and finally El Cazador de la Bruja. In each of these series, two women find themselves on the run from a mysterious organization that employs endless numbers of nearly identical lackeys, are apparently headed by a woman, sometimes also a man. Our protagonists consist of a young woman with a mysterious past and an older, like 20, older woman. Either one or both of them have mad gun skills. Not magical girls, but still kind of fantastical. But guns and action and plenty of Yuri for this new fandom hungry for exactly this. We talked about Kirika's confession to Muriel in an earlier video. Madlax gave us Vanessa and Eleanor, and Madlax and Romelda, and then we got Ellis and Nadia. The whole series wrapped up with this amazing moment as Ellis says this to a backdrop of music that gave us no question at all as to the intent.
Nadia.
それじゃあいてくれるんだな。
だってさ、よかったね、エリス。ありがとう。すごく嬉しい。でも行く。
エリス。
どうして？どうして？目が輝いてるナディが好き。
The settings were unreal reality, the voice actresses were top-notch, the soundtracks were absolutely boss, and we love these series for every ridiculous twist and turn. But all of this was sleight of hand, while B-Train filled our mind with ancient, magical fantasy conspiracies and bullets that draw no blood at all. Something major was actually happening in Japan in the pages of a magazine for young women. Kono Oyuki wrote a short story for Cobalt magazine, a magazine for teen girls, in 1998, and it was pretty popular, so Shueisha asked for some more stories about the characters, and thus a phenomenon was born. Maria-sama ga Mitaru novels ran from 1999 to 2012, 2014 if you count the Oshaku-sama Mo Mitaru novels, and ushered in a rebirth of the old S aesthetic for a new century. In 2004, 5 years into the series, when 2 to 3 novels a year were being put out, an anime was announced. And even I, far from Japan, could hear the roar of this massive fan favorite changing everything.
マリア様の庭に集う乙女たちが今日も天使のような無垢な笑顔で背の高い門をくぐり抜けていく。汚れを知らない心身を包むのは深い色の制服。スカートのプリーツは乱さないように、白いセーラーカラーは翻さないように、ゆっくりと歩くのがここでのたしなみ。私立リリアン女学園。ここは乙女の園。
We jokingly referred to this series as Catholic schoolgirls doing nothing, and we weren't wrong, but the series didn't do nothing. It was incredibly popular in Japan, enough to last 47 novels, about 24 drama CDs, and 4 seasons of anime, plus live events, cafes, and the like. It was also surprisingly influential. How so? Well, Most anime and manga fans in the early 2000s had become anime and manga fans in the early 2000s. They didn't know about Japanese history or the S movement. Even Japanese fans only often did because of echoes of reading assignments from school. And of course, in the West, we have a collective memory in fandom that went about 10 years back. Anime fandom thought anime from the mid-1990s was old. Folks who knew or cared about shoujo anime and manga might have examples from the late 60s, but really we just didn't have any of the cultural context they had in Japan. Remember, the folks born in mid-20th century Japan grew up in a girls' culture that stemmed from and was steeped in tropes and references from the early part of the 20th century. Much like when I was growing up, pretty much all the girls knew about Laura Ingalls Wilder's books about 19th century rural America. It wasn't relevant to my life particularly, but it created a body of cultural knowledge that we all shared. Suddenly, Western fandom got a reflection of that cultural knowledge, and it made no sense to them, but that wasn't the point. It was realish people in a realish setting, and through it, we got a glimpse of that whole S aesthetic. And you know what? It was really cool. I'm a huge Marimita fan, in part because it was the perfect storm of a series. Kono Sensei was a brilliant writer. The show had top-notch voice cast who, not for nothing, became fans of the novels themselves. So, now that we had a connection to S for ourselves, what do we do with it? You guessed it, we fucked it up completely. Okay, so we need to be really real here. We need to talk about anime for a second. Speaking very generally, and yeah, of course, there's always exceptions, but we can be honest with ourselves and admit anime is not generally meant for complex thought. I know you all rush to type Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I'm going to tell you flat out, that series is not as profound as you thought, but we'll set that aside for the moment. Anime is generally a form of entertainment that generally simplifies stories and ideas from print. There's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not complaining, I'm not dissing. My point is that Marimita was a 47-novel series in which characters change and grow and develop, and the creator understood the literary and artistic history she was leaning upon, and most fans didn't. So they didn't really understand the story, it was kind of slow and nothing to them. Creators and fans really like the schoolgirls thing for reasons we covered in the first Yuri Studio video, Why Are There So Many Schoolgirls in Yuri? And lots of people like the Yuri thing. As the 2000s progressed, a whole slew of Yuri series were appearing, and a lot of them were Marimita derivatives, and some of them were really good, and some of them were Kanazuki no Miko. Kanazuki no Miko was an amazing idea. The gods of ancient Japan as giant robots. Wow. And Chikane's internal homophobia in the hands of a different creative team, that could have been a breathtaking story about Japanese society and personal acceptance and societal acceptance and myth and yeah. But because neither creators nor publishers nor audience really cared much for breathtaking stories about Japanese society, acceptance, and myth, we got flute rape. Despite, or because of that, Kanazuki no Miko brought in a whole wave of fans who never really understood the whole S thing, but were totally into girls going wild and giant robots and breast-hugging uniform designs. Many years and a good half-dozen watch-throughs and reviews of the manga and its spin-offs and the multiple releases of the anime and the drama CDs, which were legitimately the best part of the franchise, I still like the OP and ED, so that's a win. Which brings us to a series that people loved, and look, I'm going to say this flat out, and totally misunderstood. Strawberry Panic began as a series of short prose stories that were icky, and were launched as an anime and a manga approximately simultaneously, and then, just as Volume 2 of the manga announced Volume 3 was cancelled. The anime was the largest and most successful fanfic of its time. Strawberry Panic anime borrowed from everything, and I mean everything. Character designs, settings, whole actual episode plots, cool ideas. We kept a running list of the stolen memes on the Yuricon community weekly at the time. Cardcaptor Sakura's Tomoyo became sexual harasser roommate Tamao, Marimita's Yoko became Miyuki. This series borrowed elements from both those and a dozen older series, but, and this is key, because the Western audience never had seen the midnight tea parties of Himitsu no Kaidan, they thought it was a brilliant idea and totally original. And in a sense, it was really a brilliant idea. Honestly, if I told you, hey, write a story that borrows ideas from these 24 stories but make it totally different, how coherent a thing could you put together? As a massive, multi-world fanfic, Strawberry Panic anime is a genuine work of art. I never liked Nagisa. The horse race will always be hilarious, but Shizuma's gray schmata of a cardigan and that ending ripped right out of The Graduate was honestly entertaining. And so Yuri was set forever in private girls' schools named after Saint Random something that aren't saints forever. Despite this, there was one more honest attempt at telling a modern version of an S story, and it was lovely.
ごめんね昨日は伝えられなくて君の笑顔も君の涙もいつか支える力になって
So, famously, the opening animation to Awaihana Sweet Blue Flowers was done by none other than our old friend Ikuhara Kunihiko. It's a genuinely lovely opening and sets the tone for a completely different attempt at bridging the 100 years gap between the early 20th and the early 21st centuries. Unlike Maria Sama ga Miteru, which had only one, maybe two specific plots that could conceivably be considered Yuri, and was, as a whole, an exploration of young women's internal lives with a whole range of relationships, Awaihana was an explicitly Yuri series that equally as explicitly connected to the S aesthetic with its literary and artistic references. And let me point out that Awaihana 2, just like Strawberry Panic, has a whole storyline underpinned by Wuthering Heights, so ha on me for making fun of Strawberry Panic. Okay, so the point is that it's 2009, we're about to enter the final decade of the first 100 years of Yuri, and it was pretty obvious that one, Yuri was here, it was a thing, we all kind of knew where it came from, and two, we all liked women in uniforms and suits. But just to make perfectly sure that we all understood all of the tropes before we started messing around with them, there was one more series that brought a lot of new fandom in. What you need to understand about this series is that it was basically Yuri tropes being explained for latecomers in comic form. You have a high school girl who's in love with her best friend. That best friend loves girls, but not athletic ones. Another girl who's a fan of Yuri light novels, but not gay ick, who falls for the girl. The best friend falls for a cross-dressing boy who looks like a very pretty girl, and two actual lesbians who think everyone around them are idiots, and a few others. But this series did that so offhandedly that, again, folks didn't know the stuff was being made fun of, and instead were like, eh? But Sasameki Koto was really a great series, and the manga is licensed in English as Whispered Words and has one of the best endings of all time. Really, go read it. Before you leave, please take a moment to click like and subscribe to our channel. It really means a lot to us. And if you like these videos and want to see more, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks again to all my patrons for this idea. All the series I've mentioned will go into the show notes and the links to our Patreon and all our essays and anything else that hopefully might be useful. And that brings us to the dawn of the final decade of Yuri's first 100 years and the series that took all these tropes and exploded them into a million shards. What was that series? Find out next time on Yuri Studio.